So you think Glenn is just walking the streets of Ridgeway with a bucket of napalm melting anybody he runs into?
True Metal Warriors subscribe to Geek Legion of Doom.
Side effects may vary. That's the name of this movie from director J.R. Bookwater. And this is a 2024 low-budget, gooey body horror, I guess you want to say. The story kind of feels a little bit like a cross between The Melting Man and the Jeff Goldblum The Fly. So this is a movie which takes place during the COVID pandemic. And we have a married couple, and the husband is a bit of a vaccine skeptic. But his wife is hassling him to get the vaccine. So he goes to his doctor and asks for the vaccine, and she tells him that there is a new trial vaccine that's just been introduced that you can have straight away. So he agrees and has this vaccine. However, this vaccine, as the title might suggest, has some side effects. And he starts to initially seem really, fit and well and everything. But there is soon some negative effects where he seems to kind of like radiate heat and ultimately secretes like a kind of an acidy residue, and then burns anything that kind of he touches, really, including his wife, for example. And not only that, he has a craving for kind of human flesh and is ultimately kind of melting himself, and he's about him kind of going across town and pursued by his best friend, a former policeman, and actual cop. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. So what works in this movie's favour? Now this is a low budget movie. It is clearly a low budget movie. So I don't think this is going to be a movie for anyone outside of that sphere. But if you are familiar with J.R. Bookwater, you'll know what you're kind of getting into. And I do think, unlike a lot of low-budget movies that I see in recent years, this one feels like there's a little bit of passion behind it. There's a little bit of trying and sort of attempt to make an entertaining film. So many modern low-budget horror films are just kind of like made over a weekend with a kind of a cover which is grey and hook a few people in and make a little bit of money each. But this one, it is still the low budget aesthetic, but you just feel there's an attempt here to make a fun, gooey effects movie. Because this movie is lots of goo, lots of kind of melting effects. The actor who plays our main guy, you got to feel a bit sorry for him. He's walking around covered in gloop pretty much the whole movie, and it gets worse as the film goes on. And it's pretty gross. I mean, there's obviously it's low budget, but it's all practical, and it's mixed in regards to its effectiveness, I suppose. But you have to appreciate some of the kind of the fun attempts here to have like this melting flesh just kind of dripping off, and as he like walks past bushes, for example, the branches like cats. There's kind of slime and bits of his skin and things like that. So it's pretty revolting, and obviously it's kind of set during the COVID pandemic, and as such, you can't help but feel there's a little bit of like vaccine skepticism actually in the movie. Like, you don't know quite what you're putting in your body and what effects these might have, even though you've told there's no side effects and things like that. So there's clearly a little bit of vaccine skepticism from J.R. Bookwater, I would say. So there's, arguably you could say this movie has a little bit of a message in it. Ultimately, it's not all that subtle, but there is that. I think our characters are actually kind of quite likeable, I have to say. We have our two protagonists, really. We have the best friend who is kind of following him around, and the actual guy who's been afflicted himself, and both of them, I think, seem sort of sympathetic and likeable, and you kind of, you appreciate their friendship and stuff like that. You appreciate neither of these two people are kind of like horrible characters. They're just, you know, sort of somewhat kind of average Joe, so to speak. So that therefore it makes them kind of quite relatable and everything like that. The movie is quite sort of well paced as well. It's, you know, it starts off relatively early with this kind of you know, the gloop attack, so to speak, and it kind of escalates from there, getting more and more people and ending up coming into contact. And it almost has a little bit of a Frankenstein's monster vibe to it as well, where this guy's not necessarily trying to go and hurt people, but he inevitably does. But he's, you know, so that you have a little bit of the Frankenstein's monster vibe to it as well. There's actually a reasonable amount of you know, screen queens from yesteryear. You know, Brinky Stevens shows up, Tina Krause, to name a couple, in sort of supporting roles. So it's kind of always kind of quite fun to see them. And the movie does have this sort of fun vibe, you know. So it doesn't work. Now, again, this is a very low budget movie, and it clearly can't afford to do a huge amount of scale. For example, we have this kind of, I mean, effectively when our police are searching for this guy, they think he's like a serial killer or a mass killer. And we only ever really see 2 police. So obviously the budget is really restrictive in regards to, you know, what it can do. So we have literally 2 police officers that are actually only ever in this movie. So it's very kind of low scale for what would obviously be a considerably serious kind of crime and things like this. I think the movie's a little unsure who our protagonist is, because you initially think it's going to be our guy who's been taken this vaccine, but then we spend a lot of time with his friend in the kind of the latter half of the movie, and it's like, who is the protagonist here? So although I think both characters are actually kind of quite likeable, it sort of is a little unfocused at times, I have to say, in regards to who are we following here? Whose point of view is this movie from? Some of the kind of the screen queens, as fun as they are, Brinky Stevens, I don't know, it goes a little bit over the top. Some of the kind of like the sexual innuendos and things like this. It's going to be a taste thing ultimately, but they kind of, for example, really have this joke where Brinky Stevens is kind of spying on her neighbours while they're having sex, and you know, it's a little bit, I mean, I'm fairly broad-minded, but even so, it was kind of like, oh, it kind of feels like it has a little bit of a taste issue at times, should we say that? Maybe not for everyone, clearly, but, you know, there are some things here where I think the jokes could be funny, but they're just sort of, they go on for too long a little bit sometimes. And yeah, I mean, just the general presentation of the movie is kind of very low budget, you know, rubber ears sticking to a tree, things like this. It's not going to change your mind if you're on the fence about sort of low budget kind of VFX and things like that. It just has this kind of like, sort of, you know, low budget film. There are some production issues here that again look a little bit rough around the edges. But I appreciated the fun nature of this movie. You know, it feels like everyone involved here was trying to make a fun movie rather than just a quick turnaround, make a few thousand out of it and things like that. It does feel like there's kind of like some sort of care and attention that's been put into it. But I'll give it a 5 out of 10. I don't think it's kind of going to change anyone's mind about a B movie necessarily. Have you seen it? What were your thoughts? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Yo! Joe, in today's video you saw how good looking the host was.